Hey everyone, my name is Jeremy Whittington. I'm with a company called Thinkaholics. We're a Salesforce consulting firm based out of Dallas, Texas. I'm sure you guys have seen this a few times at the conference, so I won't go too much in depth, but definitely be considerate on what I talk about on your decision making in the future. All right, so I guess I did my intro early, so there's my picture. All right, so today this is just going to kind of cover the what I learned on prepping and training data inside of the Salesforce Einstein platform services. I'm going to give a very brief overview of the services themselves, talk about the process I did for training, talk about some of the limits that are currently in place, a little bit about debugging, issues that you run into, and just some data considerations and kind of show you some of the data we used for our demo yesterday. All right, so quick show of hands, who's actually used Einstein Platform Services so far? Okay, overall, what Salesforce has done with the platform services is they've made the ability to load data, train models, and use AI in Salesforce very easy to do. So a part of the process that you get into when you are working with Einstein is the first step is you will essentially collect your data. Okay, so as an example from my demo yesterday, we talked about a P2P lending network. So in that scenario, we had essentially people that have either talked to an agent or filled out a form and kind of gave what kind of loan they're looking for and details about it, as well as the labels of what type of loan it was. So it'll vary on your scenario, but essentially you collect that historical data. There's also publicly available data I'll talk about towards the end here that you can use to train your models, and you get that into your data set. From there, with that labeled data, you upload and train, and we'll go into kind of how that works, programmatically and how you do that. And from there, you generate your models, and you can create one or more models, and essentially, those models will be what you use to do the different types of predictions that you want to do. Also, as you go forward and you gain more data, right? So in the lending network scenario we had, obviously routing the loan to the correct department, you would discover that it's the wrong place if it was an incorrect identification. So you could use those records to feed back into and retrain your models to help improve the accuracy of what you're training. So let's talk about the two different types of things in Einstein. The first piece is Einstein Vision. So what Einstein Vision really is the ability to take images either from the field service agents or from online, maybe taking pictures at a store. So an example here is essentially trying to identify the difference between a 3-door refrigerator or a 2-door. So you would create a data set of the different images you've collected with the labels of 3-door, 2-door, and you would use those to train your model. You can continually upload new images and keep retraining your model as new data comes in, but you would use those models to predict whether or not it was a 2-door, 3-door. And I'll kind of talk about it here in a second, but basically the platform has these APIs you can build your application on top of to send in to get a prediction and bring it back into your application. The second piece of the Einstein Platform Services is Einstein Language. So it's probably a little hard to read on some of this, so I'll read it off to you. But in Einstein Language, there are two types of processes that you can do. So one is Einstein Intent. So in my lending network example, we were using text that people talked to at the agent or text that came in from a web to lead form. and we were identifying where it needed to go. So, as an example here, does it need to go to the shipping department or the billing department? So some of these examples would be like, I'd like to check the status of my order, right? So that would be routed off to the shipping group. How can I switch between talking to preferences? So that, says how can I switch billing preferences? So that would go to the billing department. So the second piece of Einstein language is sentiment. And that is, is it a positive, neutral, or negative type comment? So some of the examples there would be your product rocks, right? So that's obviously a very positive comment. My shoes haven't arrived, right? Or my shoes arrived. That could be a neutral one. You're not sure if that's positive, negative feedback, right? Or this is what I get when I try to change my mind, right? So more of a negative comment. So, you can use both of those together to, route and figure out the sentiment of, the person, or you can use them completely separately. All right, so just to, kind of help you figure out what you need to do to get started. The first thing you would do is you'd go and sign up for the Einstein Platform Services. If you create a Salesforce developer account, you can get in for free just using your Salesforce developer login. Also, if you have a Salesforce org and Einstein licenses, you can use your company's login to also get in. But you don't have to have Salesforce. You can also purchase licenses on Heroku and just be building within Heroku itself. So once you sign up, you will get what's called a private key. So this is a file that you will use to authenticate when calling the services going forward. Make sure you don't lose this. I have not found a way yet to get it again if you lose it. So you'd have to take a new email address, sign up, and all of that. I'm sure, or I hope that will be something that gets solved, but as far as I know, you can't get it back. So don't lose the file. All right, so using your email address and the token, if you are wanting to just do something out of a browser while you're developing or uploading and training data, you can go to the token page and put in your email address and that file and say how long you would like your token for. And it'll give you back your OAuth token that you use for all of your remaining calls. You can also do this programmatically. This is just to help you either while you're loading data or just messing around. All right, so first step, I kind of already talked about, gathering that data, which is, a big process. That's definitely where you're going to spend most of your time. But once you have your data set, you're going to upload it using a REST call. And for the documentation that you get into, you'll see that they have CRL examples for you guys to use. But just showing you kind of how it works. Basically, you pass in your token that you got from the token page, as well as a path to the file that you want to load. And we'll talk about the different files here in a second. So after your data set is uploaded, the next step will become in training your models. So as I said, you can train more than one model on the same data set or multiple data sets. And essentially, the main things here are, just labeling the model itself, right? And passing in the data set ID you got from uploading your data set. All right, so getting the data into Einstein Platform Services, you have three options. One is a CSV file. The other is a TSV file, tab separated, comma separated file. And then the third is JSON. You would essentially, put your data in these files, and I've got some slides talking about the size of what these files need to be. And you can have more than one file that you continually add in if you have larger data sets. And we'll talk about that in a second. One thing, lesson learned off of this, is that if you are working with Einstein Sentiment, at least for now, you cannot use JSON when you are when you're creating your data set, but you can use JSON when you're calling to do the actual predictions. Something to just be aware of if you're programmatically trying to load data into Einstein sentiment, data sets in Einstein sentiment, you need to work with the CSV and TSV files. Okay, so let's take a look at what these files have. It's essentially the same format for CSV and TSV files, it's just different delimiter. But the first part is the text that you want to load, that you're going to train against. And the second part is the actual label itself, right? So in the lending network example I gave, we had the chat logs from the conversations with people as our data itself, and then the labeled data of this is a home loan, different types of loans. Okay, sorry about that. JSON, if you're a developer, you're probably familiar with this, but it's just little bit different structure. You have essentially your outer, intent node along with the labels and then the actual text. So it's just a little bit different format, but you can use this as well, especially if you're going to programmatically load data. All right, so some of the current stated limits, which I'm sure may change as we go forward, but just something to be aware of. So when you are training Einstein intent, you need at least 5 labels, at least 2 labels and 5 examples in each label in order to actually train your model. Obviously, in a real-world scenario, you're going to have much more than that, but even in the data that I got for my demo yesterday, there were labels that did not have 5 examples. So just as you go to load your data, make sure that each label is distributed well enough and you've got enough data. With Einstein sentiment, you need 2 labels and 100 examples each. All right, so a few other limits to be aware of. In the example I gave where I was just putting a path to the CSV file that I was uploading, that is a direct method. So when you are loading those files, the maximum size currently is 50 megs. So if you were doing the direct method and you needed, let's just say 500 megs, you would break it up into multiple files, do the initial data set load, and then add more and more data before you train or after you train, either one. If you use the URL method, where you have it on Dropbox and you pass in the URL itself, you can use up to a gig. The labels themselves have a character limit of 180 characters, so just be aware there. And then duplicates, only the first items used. So, even though someone may have kind of made the same comments, and there are many of those, it's only going to kind of look at the first example and get rid of the duplicates. Okay, so debugging. Currently, it's kind of difficult, but just talking to the Einstein group, I do know there's more in the works, but right now it's mostly trial and error. So as you're going to load data in, you're going to get back messages, from the upload and the training, and it'll be, something like process failed to complete. So, currently the best thing I know to say is, start with small data and work your way up, and just kind of think about the different ways you can clean your data, the amount of data you're trying to load, and just really think about. Just explore trying different things out to figure out what the error is about. And I will, here in a minute, show you guys some examples of the data we used for the demo and some of the cleanup activities that I did. Okay, so here are some examples of the data that we actually had for the lending network. So I'll just read one of them here. I'm requesting for a loan to finance a car I would like to purchase. So that was the text that we had in some of the examples, and we had a label of car. Just one more example. This is a loan for additional unexpected business startup costs, right? So nowhere in there does it say small business, right? So having different scenarios and different things that people say, and your label can still help. It's not keyword based; it's more context based. So the more data you have, the more examples you have, the better you'll be able to kind of refine and train your models. All right, so showing you an example of, after we've already kind of trained our data, our models, this is an example that we passed in, and this is what you get back from calling the prediction. So we passed in need to buy a new vehicle, and we had the label of car at 82%, and the next lowest prediction was major purchase at 8%. So it'll be a JSON string that comes back that you guys can parse to get the probabilities. One more example here. Would like to pay off my high interest credit cards. So that came back with a 86% match on debt consolidation, and the next lowest down was 11% at credit cards. Okay, so a few key things, resources to take a look at is the Einstein sign-up page, the token to get access to the system, as well as the documentation. And if anybody needs data to just mess around and learn stuff, I highly recommend checking out the Kaggle website. The link right there is what we use to get our loan data that we use to train. It has data from universities and public sources, some commercially available, some not, but good resource to kind of get in and start playing around with Einstein and having some labeled data. All right, so just a couple of quick things that I didn't have slides for. Actually, I'm going to pull up my data example and talk about the cleanup. All right, so this is examples of the data that we got back. Let me zoom in just a little bit, sorry. All right, so this is an example of the data that we got from Kaggle, which I'm sure the data that you're going to get out of your orgs or from other places probably has similar things that need to be cleaned up. So, as you can see, some of them had spaces in the front, some of them had like borrower. We had some that didn't have anything in the actual description, and the labels were there. We essentially went through and cleaned that data before loading it. So we got rid of all the spaces, we got rid of all the extra data, we got down to just the conversations that were going on. One thing we didn't do, but I forgot about, is removing the duplicates. It didn't really impact us, but the first time I just trained with the data I had, and after I cleaned my data up and got rid of some of the extra stuff and retrained, the probabilities matches went up. So it's definitely about getting your data and getting it cleaned and ready to load. So there's a little bit of work, or there is definitely work you'll do on getting your data cleaned up. All right, so does anyone have any questions? Okay. All right, well, I thank everybody for coming by, and hopefully you guys learned a little bit, and if you need anything, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.